Special council meeting on Monday, October 21st, City of Marshfield, 207 West 6th Street, 5 o'clock. Call to order, roll call. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Citizens' comments? Any citizens' comments? Third time citizens' comments? Seeing none, approval of minutes from the October 14th, 2024 special meeting budget. I need a motion. Motion by Alderman Weigel, second by Alderman Fire. Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you. Continued review, consideration of recommended 2025 budget. Natasha Tompkins, Vice Chairman of the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee, presiding.
Good evening. This is our second budget meeting for the 2025 budget. And I just want to extend a thank you to staff who fielded a lot of emails and phone calls this week. I'm sure you heard from many people. So thank you for answering our questions as we dug deeper into this budget. So we're going to start first with Mr. Barg. He is going to go over the requests that we had. He's going to give us some of the answers to that. That will be item F. And item G, that is when we're going to have questions. We're actually going to do that the same way we did last time, but this time we're going to go clockwise, starting with District 4 with Mr. Varsho. You'll have your floor, ask all the questions you want. If you could hold any motions until H. And H will open the floor to motions. Just let everyone ask their questions because the information that they get from their questions might affect the motion that you want to make. All right, Mr. Berg.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to start this by going kind of slowly, methodically, almost painstakingly through some of the questions that were raised at the last meeting. I'm going to start with something that's on your tables, and I believe that Derek and Rebecca, you have it in the agenda packets in there. It's the attachment that went with my memo. That'll be the first thing we'll do, and then we'll get into some of the other pages that talk about the specific cuts and the impact. But just starting out with that page that talks about specific questions and requests from the council, prior to the end of the meeting, we documented anyway, there were 4 questions or requests that were made. First one was by Councilmember Spiros, looking for an accurate projection for the City Planner Economic Development Department, noting that the projected amount was the same as the budgeted amount and whether that was correct, being that we've had certainly some unfilled positions and some other things happening this year. Staff projects that the total expenses in that category will be about $600,000 of the $656,461 budgeted. So a savings of about $56,000 from what we initially anticipated. Again, we have unfilled positions, but we also have contractors, consultants that we've been using to fill the roles of planner and economic development. So we've had to pay those costs along the way. That information is referenced on pages 99 and 101. Next up, Councilmember Spiros also asked about the capital spending plan for the police building, if we do in fact relocate to the Wildwood Plaza on the south end of town. This is found in page 150 and the link below. Basically, and I'll just kind of read from the note that I put in there, refurbishment of the Buffalo building, as we call it, is planned over the next 2 years to be financed. Page 150 of the budget book shows 2025, the first year of the borrowing, and page 5 of the 2025-29 adopted CIP details the borrowing for that project over the 5-year period. The items in red have been updated since publication of that CIP based on motions that were made during the CIP approval process for the anticipated receipt of donations, as is the case for Brain Park and the airport. and updated cost information. So that should be contained, should be able to see it in those pages of the book. And again, the link to the capital improvement plan is provided. Councilmember Spiros also asked what would be the cost of increasing the CPI adjustment for non-represented, non-library pay scale from 1% to 2%. And that would be roughly, I think I noted $30,000 in my memo, somewhere between $30,000 and $35,000 would be the rough cost of bumping it up so that we would give 2% in addition to the planned step increases. And then finally, Councilmember Tompkins had asked about the street lighting charge. If we were to adopt that, how would that play into our situation? That would cover the $260,000 cost of that street lighting budget if we were able to do it for a full year. And that's kind of what I'm representing here as a starting point. That charge would free up tax levy and shared revenue to pay for other services not included in the budget. And theoretically, of course, you've talked about staff wages that would be available for that type of expense as well. Those are the four items that were discussed during the meeting. Now I want to get to the items that the city clerk shows in her minutes that were requested at the end of the meeting for this very meeting. There are half a dozen of them, and I'll walk through them. The first one, I call your attention to that sheet I handed out. It's an attachment to what I put on your desk tonight. And if you're remote, you have this previously as well. It's the list of, I should have sent it again, the list of the proposed cuts. And again, the concern that was raised on the 14th, and rightfully so, is that these were not very detailed. You know, you see that something's being reduced, well, to what? To what degree? Are we still offering it? Are we just cutting the hours? You know, in some cases, like holding positions vacant, I didn't name them. So I apologize for that. We're gonna get more detailed this evening. I'm gonna go through them one at a time. Now, again, they're not in order in your agenda. They're by department, so it kind of bounces around, but I'll cover them, and at the end I'll look for any questions. The first item, the biggest in cost, is holding multiple positions vacant. The four positions that are referenced here are the Community Development Director position, Equipment Operator 1 position in streets. Those are both for the full year. The Civil Engineer 1 position we're proposing to hold open until June 1st of 2025. And then the Administrative Assistant in the serves as Clerk and Finance, currently shown as being not filled during the year. We do have some budgeted monies that could offset these costs if need be, if we do need to take a look sooner. Fire is the next one, and that is holding or not filling 2 firefighter paramedic positions, total of about $212,000. There has been early discussion, at least at staff level, of looking at possibly a referendum in April 2025. No decisions or no moving forward has happened yet as a possible way to fund those. Certainly, myself and the finance director and accounting manager looked at this to see if there's a way we could fit it into this budget. At that price tag, it just couldn't happen, but we're hopeful that we can get back to full speed where we were back in 2021 through some mechanism. So that might be an alternate way to look at refilling those positions. Library, the $88,000 is two-part in nature. One is cutting out the Sunday hours for roughly $22,000. The other is eliminating 1 full-time staff position. That makes up the balance of the $88,000 proposed reduction. The next one says temporary employee hours, totals about $80,000. That is kind of a mix. It includes the elimination of 2 document processor positions in the IT department. They do deal with some of the scanning and the help desk. The next one is reducing some highway and traffic control, part-time labor, totaling about $25,000. The next big one is really not, I mean, it shows as a reduction, but it's really kind of artificial in a sense. For elections, is going down $24,000 in temporary employment, simply because we have expected to have 2 elections instead of 4 in 2025, which cuts out prorated the expense of paying those individuals. And then a slight cut in the police department regarding transports of about $3,000 is in there as well. For public, and by the way, the greater description on many of these is included in your booklet, and we've got all the appropriate department and division heads here to answer any questions you might have to go deeper on these items. On Public Works, it shows the snow and street maintenance motor pool. What that is the use of our equipment, we pay into what we call the 701 internal service fund for replacement of those particular items when it comes due to for example, buy a new grader or snowplow or whatever it is. And what this will do is reduce the amount from those accounts that are paid into the 701 fund for future replacement. So initially, it doesn't appear to have a great impact, but it does affect the timing of which we can replace items when they have come to the end of their useful life. So it does have an impact on our capital items. Next item is non-represented employees. Initially, when we started the budget process, we were using 2.8% as a wage increase. That was the CPI at the time. So what you see on this document, it shows a reduction of 2.8% of adjustment on the wage scale to 1%. In reality, by the time we got to sending this document out to you, the CPI had fallen to 2.5%, although the reduction still shows us back to the original 2.8% when we began preparation. That's roughly $60,000. I'll note a little bit later, the cost, I can note it now, the cost again to replenish from 1% to 2% would be in the neighborhood of $30,000 to $35,000 if that council wishes to find a way to make that happen. Public Works on stormwater maintenance, $53,100 cut. That would be in delayed replacement of some of our corrugated metal pipes for stormwater management for our stormwater system. Again, anytime you delay that type of purchase, does it have an immediate impact? Maybe not visible to the public, but it always has an ultimate impact in terms of our system. The next one is our HSA contribution. The city established an HSA contribution to put money into employees' HSA accounts at the beginning of the year. It's been $1,200 for family and $600 for single for many years. I think it goes back to about 2016. To offset the rising cost of health insurance premiums on our employees, I propose for this year to drop it from $1,200 to $1,000 on family contribution and from $600 to $500 for single. Something I'm not fond of, but trying to find ways to make this balance work, this budget balance, I should say. It's something I put out there. And again, that'd be about $20,000 if the council would wish to restore that during this process. I'm going to go to the communications item, the website redesign. I'll explain why in a minute, but that is a project that Tom Laux is heading up as our communications director. He's called together a team of people from various departments. We're looking at possibly a new system for our website. We've had Revise for a long time. Not that Revise doesn't work, but there's some things that we believe a new system could do better for us in our website. One of the things we have to deal with is ADA compliance, which I think is coming up in the next 3 years or so. And when you think about ADA compliance, I usually think about buildings. I think about accessibility of steps and bathrooms and all that. But ADA compliance is important with respect to our website too, visual and otherwise people being able to use the information we have. So I'd be working on that, but at this time, we probably don't think it'll happen in 2025 at this point. So pulling that one off the list. Public Works, we have $5,000 for streetlights. And that is, if we need installation of streetlight during the year, it hasn't happened. I believe the last 2 or 3 years, we haven't tapped into that line item at all. If we do need to do streetlight installation, we can perhaps look to that minor contingency that we have set aside in the budget. And then fire, I put down a sort of reductions per the chief. I apologize again for the lack of detail. What you see from Chief Miller in the packet talks about 3 things. The first one is an 18-inch misting fan, followed by a cut in half of a cost related to the Citizens Fire Academy, and then a thermal imaging camera. Those 3 total about $4,700. Again, I would ask you to read the paragraphs that the chief has put in the document that you have in front of you, the agenda packet, to see more. But again, people are here to address your questions from all these departments. I left out Parks and Recreation intentionally because there are many, many items on there. And I think that Justin Casperson, our Parks and Recreation Director, did an outstanding job of explaining those on 2 or 3 pages in your agenda packet. And I will say that I thank Justin for finding these. It doesn't mean these are desirable cuts. They all involve largely service reductions, but he explains in that document what they're for, what it leaves in terms of it's a partial reduction or a full reduction of that service. And then the bottom where it says new request not included in budget, it calls out departments, police, assessing, technology, fire. These are all from requests that the technology department solicited. They went out, as they do every year, and they do a great job of this, talking to department and division heads. What are your needs? What are some of the technology needs that you have to keep your department moving forward? And does it involve equipment, software, whatever? And so Ing and his team collected this list of about a dozen items, And they had them on the list. We pulled them. We didn't have room for them. They relate to the departments you see on that list, but they, again, were funneled through technology. And Inga's done an outstanding job of explaining each one of those in the agenda packet. Again, there's just too many lines, I think, to go through one by one, and you've hopefully had a chance over the last couple of days to take a peek at those individual items. Moving along from what was talked about at the last meeting, that was the first item from the 6 on the council minutes that I saw, detailed explanation of items removed from the budget and the impact it might have on services. The second one is, how can staff wages be increased? As city administrator, on behalf of our staff, I really thank those of you who made comments back on October 14th about trying to protect the wages and benefits of our staff. We greatly appreciate that. The cuts that I made to what we would like to do in terms of HSA contributions and the keeping up with the wage scale that we just adopted recently, not something I wanted to do. So I appreciate your support in trying to make something work yet. But as far as how that goes, like I mentioned earlier, to get to 2% across the board wage scale in addition to the steps would take about $30,000 or $35,000 in that range. And again, it would take about $20,000 to restore the HSA contribution to what it's been previous to 2025, what it's been for the last 8 years at 1,200 family and 600 single. The next item, number 3 on the list from the council minutes, revisit wage cuts and report how much money need to be found to raise the 2%. That's anybody's, guess at this point. I haven't had a lot of chance to dig back with the department heads to see if we might be able to carve out some ways. Depending upon your direction tonight and where this conversation goes, I could easily turn back and see if there's any other savings we can find budgetarily with projected expenses for 2025. I will tell you that a lot of this has been combed through multiple times, and really the kind of things I see as potential budget cuts are things that would affect services, and I realize some of those have been given up, obviously, in this list, but I don't see anything painless that to pull off in particular. But I appreciate council's willingness to look at this. So again, it would take about 30 to 35,000 for the wages and about 20,000 for the health savings account. Fourth item was a detailed list of the positions cut. I think I've already given that to you, but I've got the job descriptions in your packet for all 4. Community Development Director, Equipment Operator 1, the Civil Engineer 1, and the Administrative Associate position in the Clerk's Finance Department. I do want to add, I know I sent some information out to the council recently about what they're doing over at Marshfield Utilities, where they're looking very seriously at taking on a new position called Economic, I think, Development Specialist or something like that, to work for them in the area of trying to grow a business. And that with wages and benefits, it could be, well into 6 figures. So I put that job description in your packet along with the business development job description of Business Development Director that Mackey has, that we've at least tentatively signed on to for another year, funding a little less than half of the total position cost. And I put the Community Development Director job description in that packet as well. Hopefully either prior to tonight, during this meeting, or maybe more likely after the meeting, you'll get a chance to look at that, compare and see what the different nuances are in terms of job duties and where there's overlap, if there's a gap. But really, honestly, this is what helped play me into the idea of taking that position out of the budget, leaving it vacant for 2025. The combination of what's already being provided by Mackey and potentially from utilities, along with the fact that Marshfield Utilities is at least talking about potentially reducing the dividend to the city of Marshfield that we get annually to cover some of those costs, perhaps all of those costs for all I know, of their new economic development position. So the potential of reduced revenue plus the overlapping duties in the area of economic development, plus we'll still have a consultant working for us on our behalf, led me to make that call. The last 2 items are really not things we're going to tackle today, but they are huge items. I think they're bigger than what we're talking about tonight and next Monday, although we need to get through a budget and adopt one. That's our charge in the coming weeks. But a strategic plan, which we talked about getting on as soon as the budget process is over, where we look at mission, where we look at what are the things that we want to get done, what are the resources we have, what are our targets. We really haven't done deep strategic planning. I think I mentioned last time I met with you folks that we've had a staff-driven strategic plan, 3-year one, twice now in the past 6 years. And that really has been focused, not to rehash what I said at the podium, but on specific goals, complete the 17th Street reconstruction from, from Peach over to Maple and those type of things, but they really haven't been higher level. Who are we? What are we about? How are we going to provide, what services do we want to keep providing for sure? How do we do it in tough times? That'll come into play starting December and moving into early 2025. And the other that goes right along with it, I think Councilmember Stauber did a great job talking about this the other day. Are there public-private partnerships available to us that can help us cut some of our costs but keep producing and providing the programs and services that we have? Are there volunteer groups that might be able to help us? Are there ways to get some of the things done differently than we've done in the past? That won't happen. I mean, you're not going to have volunteer police officers, okay? That's not going to take the place of our sworn staff. But there are things that maybe we could partner with other agencies in the community and help us and reduce our costs and still be able to continue some of those programs and services. So that is my report based on everything I have detailed from the previous meeting, questions that were asked during the meeting, and ones that were asked at the end in terms of follow-up for this meeting. I would take any questions you might have. And like I said, we have professional trained staff to address them as well. At this time, I would turn it back to you, Councilmember Tompkins.
Thank you so much. All right, so we are going to open the question time. So we'll start with Mr. Varsho.
I don't have any at this time.
Mr. Fire. Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Werman. You have the floor, Mr. Werman.
Thank you. And no apologies needed at all. Okay, so I have missed the last meeting due to work, and I will miss the next meeting due to work. So I've done a lot of research on this. I've been looking at a lot of things. And so in regards to everything that we just went through and recap from the last meeting here, a couple things I wanted to run through, and apologies if this gets long-winded. Thank you to everyone for putting all your additional thoughts into this and the extra breakdowns. I definitely appreciate it. I watched the video of the budget meeting last week, and kudos to everyone on the council. You all did a fantastic job bringing up some very good questions, and I love where our priorities are and trying to make sure that we have what's best for the people in regards to pay and benefits. And also, I really like this structure. I think this worked really well this year. It looked very organized, and everybody did an awesome job. Couple of things that Steve was just bringing up that I had thoughts on, and that is some of the positions that are not filled currently. It sounds like we're planning to cut those. One of the things that I was thinking is that we should look at all positions. If we have any additional positions that aren't open, obviously anything that's open, as hard as it would be, should be cut prior to cutting any people. So I would rather get rid of those positions and then double back on that. As a result, I think we have a rare opportunity here to really start thinking ahead. I think we need to look at least 5 years ahead. I know that there are unknowns, there are variables, but if we can look and say, we know that we're not going to have these positions, we can start calculating some overtime based on what we expect, because that's going to throw our budget off next year. So we're going to get into next year's budget not having filled a position, and then we're going to panic because we're going to be like, oh my God, the budget was higher because of all this overtime. So I think we should start looking ahead at those things. That also gives us the opportunity to look ahead at consultant fees. If we're going to continue to not fill these positions right now, we are working with consultants. Let's start planning for that. We may find a position where we can actually save money in the long run, or we may find that it's not worth it. So I think we really need to start thinking outside the box. And what's nice is this has kind of driven a lot of our strategic talk, I think. So harping back on, we need to invest in our current people. I love what everybody was saying last week. I think Rebecca and Mike started this conversation out, and I really think we need to continue it in that. Right now, it's kind of like we're in hell, and we really need to provide some hope to the existing people. It's already a tough time. It's hard to draw people in, but now we need to give these people a reason to stay. So I think we need to put a lot of focus on making sure they get that pay and making sure we keep their benefits where they're at. And then start planning ahead so we can give them a path out of this as well. So a couple other thoughts I wanted to throw out. I don't know if we've considered offering any kind of early retirement instead of making cuts, but I think that's always something to look at. I know the clinic has done that in the past. I don't know how well it works. I'm not going to pretend to be a financial expert, but throwing that out there. And then a lot of the items that you just went through, Stephen, all of those details, just a few things that I thought we should maybe bring up, and that is, can any of those items that we're possibly cutting be done in the CIP? For example, the snow motor pool item, the communications website group, can any of that be done in CIP versus just operational expenses? Can we use any of the public works money that we save from grants to replenish some of the funds that we might be giving up? Because I know we typically wind up saving money versus what we plan, and I think we reinvest that into other streets projects, but it may be something where we could look at possibly replenishing those funds. And then kind of the same thought process along parks. I had a long list of stuff for parks because there were so many items, you know, asphalt repairs, is it possible to do grants for that or tie it in with anything for public works? You know, is it possible to pull in program fees to help offset some of the fees that we would be essentially giving up, like managing the UW fields? I know that Justin had mentioned like softball fields or softball team, soccer team. Is it possible for those programs to up their fees to help contribute towards that? Pickle Pond, can we take donations for keeping open, you know, the warming shack? It sounds like that's the only one. And truthfully, it's not a high, you know, item, a line item, but obviously we just need to make cuts where we can. But that doesn't mean we can't have people donate for something they're passionate about. We also have a youth group for hockey and ice skating that, you know, wants to open a building. That'd be a great opportunity to help give back to the community as well. Things like that we could explore. And so a couple of the things I thought we need to pull is we need to pull, like I said, pull some overtime, figure out what that's going to cost us in the long run. Let's pull consultant fees and figure out what that's going to cost us over the next couple of years if we do that instead of hiring. And then I also think we should pull some usage statistics. I know Jill provided some last week. I didn't get to look at for the library, but when it comes to, you know, Parks and Rec and things like that too, I know there's a lot of people talking about the swimming lessons. I saw those in the packet, but even like Pickle Pond, if there's certain times that that's really heavily used, same thing with the fountain hours. I saw we were cutting that down. That could be another one. You know, is there a certain time where maybe it's dead from noon to 2 that we could turn that off? Maybe it's not, you know, but it's kind of evaluating that a little bit more in depth. But overall, I think those were kind of my thoughts. The only other thing I had for library was just, since I didn't get a chance to ask Jill last week, is there any alternatives instead of closing completely on a Sunday? Could you open later 2 or 3 days out of the week? Maybe there's certain days that are less busy. So just trying to think outside the box and throw a couple things out there. I think there's a few action items to walk away from, but hopefully it's not too much of an ask. But I do think it doesn't have to be done by next week, but it's something we should start looking ahead for.
Thanks. And first of all, I want to applaud you for all the time you put into it and all the questions and ideas, thoughts you came up with. I really appreciate it. It looked like to me like you were reading from notes, and that may be helpful. Yeah, okay. Okay, that'll be really helpful in a minute because I started scribbling and then I stopped because there's a whole lot to it. But I've got obviously some outstanding staff people in front of me who I think are able to answer some of these questions. So I may ask you to go back to some of these. I want to make sure that your points are addressed. Let me start with the staffing part at the beginning if I can. And I'm kind of looking out at Sarah at this point as our HR director, but at the time that this budget was put together, I don't think there were any available open staff positions that I didn't look at least for holding vacant, except the one that comes to mind is the senior planner position. Honestly, if we're not going to fill the community development director position, there's no way we cannot have a senior planner. And the department itself came to the conclusion, and they told me this pretty clearly, that if they, you know, could get one of those two positions only, the one they really wanted was senior planner. That's the daily and weekly need more than the director, believe it or not. So, but I don't, you know, I looked at that, and you didn't hear me say this last time, but you kind of played into it with your comments. My goal in all this is to maintain our core employees, our full-time staff, and provide them with good, you know, good pay and benefits. That's number one. And they deserve it, and they actually really don't deserve the fact that I had to trim back from where I wanted to in this budget, but you know, hopefully they understand the finances we're dealing with. But along with that, I'm so excited about strategic planning, and this is why, because the whole idea, I hope comes out of the strategic planning process is what are the key services and programs we want to continue, you know, and then matching the resources and the staffing to those activities. I have people who see me sometimes and say, well, Steve, could we do without this position, or could we do without whatever? It's all a matter of what you want to accomplish. What are the expectations? What are the things we're trying to provide? And then you match up the staffing levels with those expectations. As far as the early retirement issue, it's not something we've talked about. Doesn't mean we couldn't. I know it goes on in the private sector. At this point, I'd really prefer it to be based upon identified areas that we might want to downsize on if we decided that we're going to not provide a certain service or program or reduce a certain area. Then when it becomes available, it might be a chance to offer that to somebody. But absent a discussion or a decision in terms of expectations of service levels, it's pretty hard to say that we would even want to encourage anybody to step aside. It might be from a position that we badly need in a department that is already maybe not fully staffed. I probably missed some of that, but hopefully that answered some of your staffing issue. I do feel passionate though about really taking care of our full-time staff that we have today to the best ability possible. The things you talked about with, now I'm going to start looking at some of my department heads as we go along here, but about moving website development and a couple of other things into the CIP and maybe doing it as a borrowing item or something else. We've tried really hard, and I'm kind of looking at Jordan and Jennifer as I say this, to try and make that list really more germane to what ought to be in a capital improvement program. We've wandered into territories before. In fact, we do say capital purchases or larger purchases of 10,000 and up are eligible, but by and large, some of those things really are not capital in nature. So our ideal way to treat something like a website project would be in the 101 general fund and not as a 401 capital item. So there may be some ways we can twist that a little bit around with some items, but we're trying to clean that up a little bit. Grants, I know you mentioned that, and I looked out at Tom Turchi as you did it. We get some money from grants. I don't know what that means in the bigger picture of trying to offset other costs. Have to look at that on a case-by-case basis. If there's dollars we didn't expect to get, and that drives down the ultimate cost of a project, and he's had great success in working with DOT and others, that's helpful. I don't know what it means, sitting right here where I am right now today. After that, I have to go back to where you're at, and I'm guessing that I may need help from the people I'm looking at right now to step up and address some of those questions. So after CIP and grants, what was next? Oh, okay, thank you. Donations, pick upon. Yeah, Justin, would you be willing to step forward and maybe address a couple of the parks issues? Yeah, starting with the idea of donations for the Pickle Pond warming house, I'm guessing. And then I think he talked about park and recreation fees and other things. I'm going to kind of turn it back to you, Derek, if you can maybe set this up for him.
Yeah, no worries at all. Thanks, Justin, for stepping up. There was a bunch of stuff, obviously, in parks, and thankfully, I think it was because there's a lot of smaller items. But to just kind of recap some of the things, asphalt repairs, I know we mentioned. I was just curious if any of that can be tied into anything public works or grant related. I know the ash trees are in there. That one's kind of a tough one. I think we're looking for alternative solutions for a lot of that. The UW fields, I was asking about program costs. And I think that kind of goes to Pickle Pond as well. I know I just mentioned donations, but also, like I said, there's that group that's looking to try to get an ice rink, a new ice rink hockey building in. I didn't know if that's something we could pursue. Maybe they would want to contribute to the community in that way. And then just kind of usage for the fountain, the zoo events, stuff like that, seeing when it's popular and maybe finding ways we can cut down there, but not completely eliminate.
Okay, so I'll try to answer those, kind of how you went through them. Ash tree treatments, we work with their forestry operation. Those are perpetual, so that's $7,500. That injection would have to be made to those trees for the life of that tree. There's no guarantee that tree won't die from an automobile accident, strike by lightning, another pest, another fungal pathogen. It could die from something else. We think we're at a point now with our EAB response plans where we can start preemptively removing those and start replacing them with new trees. So that's kind of a good thing to do, is we're going to start to reduce that cost no matter what. And this is a good time to kind of pull that trigger and start transitioning into plantings instead of injections. You talked about the UW sports field that's currently owned and maintained by the UW. We just give a contribution of $3,500 about 5 years ago. They went to every other week mowing, and the community groups that use it, whether that's captain's practice for the boys soccer team or the girls soccer team, or groups that go down there and use it, we felt it had to be mowed on a regular basis, especially for soccer, because you're kicking the ball on grass and you need to roll a certain way. So we helped pay for that. And plus there was a portable toilet down there. we're able to move a lot of those things over to either Greasy Park or maybe some of our ball fields like S.J. Miller Park to the outfield, or maybe even MAC, which is our softball fields. So we'd move soccer fields to those locations. They would still be responsible for that maintenance and care of that property, so they'd still maintain them or mow every other week. And I have been in conversations with Columbus Catholic Schools to see if they'd have any desire to help with the maintenance costs related to the ball fields, the softball and the baseball fields, because they're kind of the main users of those fields right now. We currently get very little, if any, revenue from that operation. Just a few rentals, maybe a few $100s at the most. I think, what else did you have? Sorry. The fountain hours, the fountain itself is operated by a bollard. So if no one's there, it doesn't run. And when you push it, it runs for 16 minutes. And it's a 16-minute sequence where different things shoot water, and then it ends. And if no one's there, it doesn't start again. So the only way it works is it's on or off, and then the only way it operates is if it's pushed. It only runs for 16 minutes. So if it's not popular, meaning it's not warm, it's not running. So no one's there. Oh, well, it shouldn't be running, but there's no one there to push the button. Does that make sense? And we don't staff it. We don't treat the water. We don't heat the water. So it's just our water cost related to that operation.
Do we have usage on when that gets hit? And I'm just curious because, like I said, looking at, when you're cutting that time down, I think we're shaving off, an hour is what it is, I want to say. I remember looking at it and
it's about
thinking,
2 hours.
Okay, it wasn't a huge change. Like we did it year over year. So I was just curious, is there certain times where it's just dead, where it's we don't even really need the water running? And that's why I was thinking, maybe people bring their kids around lunchtime and then there's a gap, from 1 to 3 where nobody's using it. And then, around dinner time. I just didn't know if we had usage statistics on that we'd be able to look at or review.
Yeah, we have a 3-year usage history down to the hour in a day. We know which days are popular, which hours are more popular, which hours are least popular. Most of it's all weather driven typically, then typically family driven. Believe it or not, most of our weekend usage of that type of facility is low because we're kind of a weekend travel. We all go up north to our cabins and go do those things. So our peaks are usually Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays, and it's usually a bit lower on weekends. I know Friday night's a little bit busier because we have our concert series, or unless there's an event or activity there, it's usually pretty low. So yeah, that water doesn't run unless there's an actual button being pushed, or if it's not on, it doesn't operate. So we would change those hours from 11 to 7 to 12 to 6, which we think would be the best use. I think Pickle Pond was your last one. Currently, we don't receive any money for that. We don't have a revenue generator. People don't pay a fee to use that. They also don't use a fee for Wenzel, which has ice skating. And we also have ice skating at the Gerlang Show Palace for a lot of the hockey teams. We felt it was best to make that cut because we could still have ice skating in the community, but we weren't getting rid of ice skating. And currently, there's no warming house at the Gerlang Show Palace or Wenzel. We can meet with the hockey group to see if they're interested in operating in a few days, or maybe do some special days, or talk to some community groups about possibly giving donations towards it. As for generating revenues with this, I think our main emphasis was to cut the expenses. So generating revenues to offset this doesn't really help our goal of trying to reduce those expenses. And I believe Jordan and Jennifer, that's correct, right? We want to reduce those expense side. Revenues don't really help us in this scenarios. They're waffling.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it from the perspective of, unfortunately, we're cutting something that benefits the people, right? So if we can find a way that they can keep it open, even if we have to cut the expense from our side, it still gives them those opportunities. So I'd rather do the work on our end and try to help them out if we can. And I did miss a line item that I had down here about the UW Fields, and that was you had a note about the UW Fields and not being able to help coordinate reservations for that. Are we currently investing a lot of time in that? Is that something that could be automated? Maybe you could do, I'm oversimplifying it, but maybe doing something like a sign-up genius where people are allowed to go and sign up on a website and reserve the field for that time so they have kind of that receipt, if you will, or are you guys currently booking all that?
We are currently booking, but it's maybe 15 reservations a year. So it's very minimal for our staff impact. And they typically always have questions of usage, what can they do, size of fields, bathrooms, that type of stuff. So it's typically a lot of phone conversations to be had.
Sure.
Jordan's here to answer your
Sounds
other
good.
question about revenue to offset our expenses.
So
Thank you.
what was asked of the team members is if you can raise revenue, that's fine. It's just hard, given only a few weeks to try and create ideas that would generate new revenue streams. Okay, and then not only that, those things also have to be adopted by boards and commissions in order to have it fulfilled. Do revenues help? Absolutely. We should not just be looking at expense cuts, we should be looking at revenue opportunities. I'm a firm believer that other cities do it, and we should too.
Agreed. And Jordan, to that point, I'm thinking of this from the perspective of accepting the fate that we are going to have to cut these items going into next year, knowing full well that hopefully this is an item we can continue to support after we get through 2025. But in order to do that, we need to set something in place to say, how can we help make this self-funded, and then eventually it becomes a revenue source rather than just offsetting. But yeah, so just kind of tossing out a few ideas. And I think that takes care of everything, Justin. I won't make you stand up there anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Berman.
Did you want to continue with the list? I know there was one about the library and other things, wasn't there, or did I misunderstand?
No, and I think that one is more like, that's something Jill could shoot me back. I know she did the pre-work on that. I was just throwing out, outside of the box options, so I'm not going to question the work she's already done. No, I really think that pretty much covers it. Like I said, the big thing for me is I think we need to focus on people and purpose, and I think everybody kind of summed that up last week. And so I just wanted to make sure that we're really thinking ahead. And I think, like I said, the biggest takeaways out of this is we really need to start planning ahead for the next probably 3, 4, hopefully 5 years, where we can say, we're not filling this position. Let's just assume we're not going to be able to fill it next year, and let's start planning for consultant fees and the additional fees, the overtime that we're going to tack on. And let's not wind up behind, the ball next year.
Yeah, thank you. And that point was not lost. I didn't address it, but I mean, for example, we proposed to delay hiring a civil engineer 1 until June 1st. And, in talking with the appropriate staff, we can find our way through that. But if that were to go on longer than that, we'd certainly be looking at the likelihood of consulting costs with a firm like MSA or somebody else to help get these projects done. And that would have a definite offset in terms of the budgetary savings. There's no doubt about that.
All right, thank you. Mr. Fire, you have the floor.
Good evening. I have the issue, I'd like to have us adopt that streetlight charge, and everybody, we had a vote on that, and I can't remember how it went, but if it covers $260,000, that would help us free up some levy to do some of these things. And I think the main thing I want to see is get back to that 2.5, a pay increase for our salary, for our employees. I think that it's time we try to get caught up. Every time we save a 1 point something, it adds the 2 point next year, and we never get ahead. And I think that, and if everybody's kidding themselves and don't think that we're going to add that light thing to something else, it's going to come like everything else. You got to find a way to save money. And this is a way to save it. And I think that we should put it back in the budget, and we should just save that 200. And then it gives to free up some of these descriptions that we have in these. We got to remove some of these things then. That would be my request.
Can we put that in item G? Would that be okay?
Yep.
Okay. Do you have any other questions?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel.
Thank you. Couple of general questions. I'm not even sure who to direct these at. And once again, they might be dumb questions, but I'm gonna ask them anyways. The budget needs to be approved by when? End of this month, is that correct? Or prior to that?
What it is it really ties to the end, and then you work backwards, kind of, plugging in. We need to get the tax bills out by the middle of December. And as a result of that, we needed the length of time we need to be adopting the annual budget and the tax levy, in late November. And before we can have that public hearing and adopt it, we need to publish it in the local newspaper 15 days in advance. That's why the schedule you have shows us publishing it in the local official newspaper in early November. The 15-day period goes by, and then I think it's like the 26th of November that we adopt it. So you kind of work backwards on that one. That's why we're hopeful. In fact, we really need to get the budget sent on to public hearing, where you guys give it a blessing by the end of October.
Right. So we're looking at maybe a hair over 7 days here if we're being, pushing the limits. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not saying it'd be impossible to have a meeting after the 30th of October, but it would have to be very shortly thereafter because time is of the essence to make any changes and get that thing to the publishing. So yeah, pretty
Agreed.
much.
So with that time frame in mind
What?
here, realistically, the only tools in our tool belt that we can use right now are going to be cutting X, Y, or Z. Adding revenue at this point of the game is a little too late. Is that correct to say too?
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly the idea that we could get the total year's revenue out of that is yet to, I mean, it's hard to picture because even in our revenue projection, I don't think we put in the full year because we didn't expect to be implemented. We have to adopt an ordinance and we have to go through a lot of mechanics to get that thing implemented. In fact, in talking with Jennifer, I mean, I think it's questionable what we could actually do in 2025. But certainly for adopting the budget on, in the coming weeks, that would be very difficult to accomplish.
Right. And I am probably beating the dead horse here, but just to clarify here, taking Mr. Warman's suggestion there of like a donation box or something like that for Pickle Pond, we're kind of behind the eight ball here before we can even get a number to even do that. Now, I know I'm talking something fairly small, but it's a little too late in the game for that, correct?
Yeah, correct. And what I take from Mr. Fire's comments, and I appreciate them greatly, is that as part of that discussion we get into, we've got to look at additional revenues and new revenue sources. I know it's kind of a sore subject for certain members of the council. And it really does come down to the level of expectations of what we provide for programs and services. I mean, if you're willing to do less, I think we can do it on less revenue. But if we're going to continue to do what we're doing now, I sound like I'm pounding the drum a little loud here, but with a limited levy increase we get from the state and the limited state aid increase, I mean, revenues are hard to come by to keep up with even the cost of living. Even a CPI of 2.5% or 3% is very challenging given the amount of revenue we're even allowed to raise from ourselves normally.
Right. So,
And that truthfully, if I can just go one more step, that is why you're going to start seeing, and maybe I said this 2 weeks ago, you're going to start seeing cities and villages across Wisconsin, I think, start looking to referendum for general operations, the same way that school districts started doing years ago. I don't think that'll be a pretty day, but when you look at what Madison and Wausau and other cities are facing, in terms of budget deficits, I think the day is probably coming. So that was a long-winded answer, probably not even exactly directed toward your question, but we certainly couldn't get a whole year of benefit on it.
right. No, and so the whole point of asking that is just to reframe our discussion here. And I think Mr. Fires brings up a good point of something that needs to be addressed in the long term, and same with Mr. Warman too. We just don't have the time to get those answers right now. So I think we need to focus on the budget in front of us right now, get that across the finish line, and then after that, have a list of items that we need to start addressing for 2026, or maybe later after 2025, but something of the sort, because absent that, we're already seeing what's going on. We're just gonna be hemorrhaging different services left and right. So other than that, no further questions.
All right. Mr. O'Reilly.
Thank you. I will piggyback a little here on what Mr. Rigel said. I would agree with that. And revenue is definitely something we need to be looking at. But in reference to the street lighting, I think one thing that may not have been discussed or that probably should be discussed is we have this magic number out there of $250,000, $260,000, but the utility is in the process of retrofitting all this lighting. The consumption that's going to be used on the LED lights versus the fixtures that are in there right now has potential to knock off 50 to 70% of that usage cost. So although we may get a year of it, we still can't charge that $260 every year and call it a fee if, in fact, our usage goes down by that much. So it's just something to consider when you're going through this process. I don't know how this is being handled exactly with the utility and the lighting retrofits, but I don't know if there's a cost associated for the city with the installation or the purchase of these lights, but there's a lot of focus on energy money out there available for this, and projects like this I've seen actually come in with a flat cost with the benefits and rebates that are out there.
Mr. O'Reilly, could we save that discussion if there's a motion? Can you just stick to questions right now? Would that be okay? If there's a motion to do the streetlights,
Sure.
let's have that.
Sure. Okay, then we'll get into the question. Specific question request from members to council. I was looking at the cost increase for the employees' pay is roughly $30,000. Right now, pickleball lights will cover it, which is a want versus a need. I am looking at, excuse me, the $260,000 cost. Again, we'll go back to the retrofits and the costs associated with that. And I guess in reality, what that is a question to how do we, I want to make sure that we're not looking at that depending on that revenue to consistently stay at that rate. I think we should potentially revisit looking at the painting truck for the street department. We're cutting a lot of stuff out of there. Could we, for a few years, potentially look at hiring that out, although it would create some street openings that may not happen as fast, but I think there should be some type of a review. What's more important and how does that affect the budget? I am looking at the 701 fund. For instance, snow motor pool, $75,000 reduction. I have a question on that 701 fund. Is that being overinvested in? Because I know we've used that fund to pay for some other stuff out of there. Namely, I believe a fire truck was bought out of that fund.
I think so.
Or a portion of it?
I don't think so. I'm looking at finance staff right now. I mean, the police and fire departments are not a part of the 701 fund, but
That was my point.
I'll let Jennifer address what she knows.
So something like that may have predated me, like
Yeah.
by a decade or so. But what we did use that 701 for was the police radio lease. And that ended last year, but that was $50,000 or $60,000 a year for about 5 years.
That's kind of
That fund paid for, that didn't get money charged back as revenue.
And that's kind of what I was getting at, is because they're not paying into that 701 fund either. So I think just making sure that the actual contributions are being used for what the contributions are supposed to be and keeping it in line with that is important. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I'd just like to quickly speak on that. Probably around a decade ago, the 701 fund was spending approximately $700,000 a year on replacing vehicles and replacing equipment that was part of that fund. We are down to $400,000 a year, so we have cut back quite a bit because of the balance that's in there. So
Okay, good. That sounds good. Just making sure. Stormwater maintenance. I don't know if someone can please clarify, is this dealing with just like culverts, or do we have corrugated steel under the roads and everything? I mean, other than maybe where creeks cross or something? I'm just having a little trouble understanding exactly where we're all using these.
Yeah, so the street division is responsible for the maintenance of all of the infrastructure that's related to the storm sewers in Marshfield. So we did look through, with our work schedule through the summer, the street projects that we have, that storm maintenance has kind of taken a back seat, unfortunately. Kind of set to the side to get our street repairs completed. That has caused that budget to go several years unspent. Some of that maintenance has been falling behind through the budgeting process. So it's found that unspent money could be recaptured and utilized elsewhere. That does put some additional pressure on borrowed money on the 401 project schedule. If big repairs do need to happen, there would be some impact. Street projects would have to be pushed off because now that budget has taken a financial hit through this budgeting process.
Okay, so where do we actually use, is this only reference to the corrugated steel, or is it?
Chestnut has, typically every curb street has some form of storm system running under it to collect all the rainwater. And so it's citywide. We have them running through right-of-ways, backyards, the culverts under ditch or under driveway approaches. Anything not on a 401 project for that calendar year would have typically fallen under this budget for maintenance and repair.
Thank you for the explanation. I have a question on Parks and Rec aquatic supplies, travel, training, 11,500. There's mention in there of cutting to reduce supplies for concessions. Isn't that something that we ultimately make money on?
This will be our third full year, and after our third year, we realized what is more of the average, so we reduced that. Unfortunately, we submit our budget in July, in the middle of our swim season, so it made sense to make that cut after the fact.
So
the budget was
we would
presented
still
to you.
do it, it's just falling in line with.
Yeah, sometimes when you're still new or you just open a facility, it takes like 3 years to figure out kind of what your averages are. So this is more of what the actuals are rather than any type of significant reduction in operation costs. Does that make sense?
You can stay up there for a second, Justin, please. What is the travel that's listed?
We currently train all of our staff either in first aid, CPR, or lifeguard training. There's not actual travel. It's just, that's what it's labeled, travel and training education. Gotcha. So it's for certifications or recertifications.
Perfect. And we can't live without that. So how do we, if we're cutting that, are they going to be responsible for it on their own?
Once again, we finally have an idea of what it costs to train, the number of staffing levels, what the training costs. Plus, Amanda went and got her certification. So instead of contracting or hiring someone to do it, she's able to do it internally, which saves cost.
I think that's it for you. Ash tree treatments, we've heard a little bit about that. I noticed that it's in Parks and Recs and also streets. Are they just different?
We get to share that baby.
Okay.
So it's kind of it's an every other weekend type of situation.
I was hoping it was just an oversight and we gained 7,500. Special events at Wildwood Zoo. I just want to say that I love the idea of that raising money. Wenzel Family Fountain Hours. How do we calculate that 3,500? Sorry, Justin. How do we calculate that? You were. How do we calculate that 3,500 not knowing how much we use?
We do know how much we use and we do know the rates and we know all of that. So that was a calculation we had.
Okay, so what does it cost for water monthly there?
Well, monthly, I'll have to, I didn't figure out like what the month was. We do have.
Do we know annually what a water bill is?
Yeah, it's about 10,000.
Okay.
But it does vary based on heat. The weather, the hot weather drives that the biggest factor.
Okay.
Am I dismissed?
Training in Parks and Rec maintenance operation, what does that consist of?
That's primarily the travel. We currently have a company, MEW, that does our internal training. That's primarily what they go to.
Okay. I promise I'm done with you now.
I'm not leaving.
I think we've I'm assuming that ADA for computer or communications, that makes sense now. I was kind of thinking the same thing. What is that?
Yeah.
I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Spiros.
Hello. I don't really have too much. I just had a couple of questions. So the city planner economic development, what's in there is the $656,461,000 budgeted, but its projected expense is $600,000. Is it possible that we just leave that at $600,000 and take the $56,461,000 extra that you have in there and apply that towards employee raises? And if we go over, what exactly are we budgeting in our contingency this year?
Jennifer's at the podium.
Yeah.
So I'll take the first part of that question. When we're in the general fund, we look at the fund as a whole. So if we save money in one area, we might overspend in another. And so at the end of the year, you really have to end at a positive net for the whole fund before we could then allocate it to the next year. That might happen in 2024, but we won't know that until we close the books.
So the answer is no.
Right now, it's too soon to tell where we will position ourselves at the end of the year, just because we have a lot of unpredictable payouts that occur in December. I think if we looked at utilization across the board for 2023, I mean, across the city, we were at about 98% used of our general fund budget, so that doesn't really leave a lot of room for carryover. We do have our carryover process that comes in late November. We could set aside money if we were more certain, but even that's a little too soon.
All right. And what did we put aside for contingency in the 2025 budget?
We haven't, right now we have about 35,000 in contingency. But as we're going through, we're finding things, small things here and there where we maybe have better information today that may kind of deflate that a little bit. But that's where.
Okay, wait. So we're not adding to our contingency fund for next year's budget?
Not at this point in the process. So we kind of have a strategy with our contingency. So last year we had that $2 million contingency in there. So what that means in terms of our budget is through the expenditure restraint program, we're allowed a certain amount of increase each year. We got a really huge allowance in 2022. So we put it in there as a budget base building for the program. But we didn't intend to use it unless we had an unanticipated revenue come in to support the actual spending of the money, because we truly did not want to consume our fund balance. When we get through the process, we will take probably in the next a week or so, we'll take another look to see what we should be putting in contingency. Let's say we implement a wheel tax and when we expect that to generate $500,000. If we don't build that into our budget because we have that kind of allowance give, we would have to exit the expenditure restraint program the next year because we would go over budget if we happen to start spending that money. So we preserve our allowable budget increase in anticipation of a new revenue source.
And as far as the contingency itself, apart from the addition we do to deal with the expenditure restraint program, some of you who've been around for longer, Mike Fire, Rebecca, I think Russ, in your previous time on council may remember that we had a number of years when we had, upwards of $100,000 to $125,000 in contingency, which is more representative of a $25 million general fund budget. You look at what's been cut here that you're looking at, this time around, and for the past couple of years, there just isn't room to carve that out. So ideally, we would have more than we do than the 35,000 that Jennifer referenced, but it's just not there.
Okay, moving on from that then. So the IT, is Eng there?
He is. He's going to the podium right now.
Okay. Okay. Eng, my question for you is, how many full-time employees are in your department right now?
Total of 4 full-time employees.
You have 4 full-time, and that's including you?
Yes.
And then do you have any part-time people, regular part-time people?
They are temporary part-time, so those two, one of them is a document processor, and then another one is a document processor / help desk assistant.
Yes. So you have generously agreed to give up those positions, which would then put you at your 4 full-time people in your department, including yourself. So how will all of that work get done?
So I guess first off would be the document processor positions. That position mainly do the scanning and indexings. Because we are near the tail end of that, we are finishing up scanning and indexing the old document that we initially, slated to do when we have that enterprise document management system. So certainly, I don't mean to say that we no longer have boxes of paper documents, as I wrote in my documents, in my write-up, that we still have boxes of documents. It's just that those are lower priority. So until someone come to us and say we still need to scan them in or dispose of them, so that person kind of running low at this point in time, and that's the reason that we give up that positions. And the second position, when we created that, when we have a vacancy a few years back, we decided to make that half and half, and that was a planning to, in case we are running low on the document processing, that person can be trained up to do some help desk assistant. So without that help desk assistant, it just means that if there's a call and the 4 of us are not in the office or out and about and helping out other people, there will not be someone answering the help desk call. Or if that person need to help us deploy new machine, pushing out fixes and whatnot that we need to do manually, those would have been, done by the help desk assistant. Those would have to be delayed, essentially. Can we limp along with that? I guess we'll work with what we got, so.
Yeah, so do you anticipate seeing much overtime from your staff to fulfill these 2 roles that you're cutting out?
I would say highly unlikely. Part of the reason is 3 of the 4 positions are salary, so they are not going to get overtime, including myself. Only 1 person is hourly employees, and we try not to use that person, more than the allocated 40 hours a week.
Okay, so you'll just stretch your salaried employees to more hours a week if that work needs to be covered. Okay, I got that.
Yeah.
All right, and then I have a couple of questions. Okay, the paint truck that Mr. O'Reilly brought up, where is that in the budget? Is that in our budget? And if so, how much is that? Or is that in the capital improvement plan? Where is that at?
Okay, that's not an IT thing.
Not an IT. I'm done, Ang, with you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm pulling up the memo right now. So that was a 2025 purchase in the CIP, and it's in the CIP book under the street department. And that was approved by the Board of Public Works a couple of weeks ago. And then that consent agenda was approved by the council. So that equipment is currently ordered. It is a 701 expense. It totaled $249,000. Again, that's equipment we determined based off of all the rest of our equipment that it was ready for a replacement. Obviously, our priority is our plowing fleet, and then some of these other pieces of equipment that are necessary for our work have to fit in line in that budget. As Tom mentioned, we did previously have a budget of about $700,000, and we knocked that down to $400,000, which also helps offset these one-on-one budgets and the pressure on the motor pool charges within them. We work close.
So the budget is.
Go ahead.
So the budget for the 701 is going to be down to $400,000.
Yeah. So
and we're taking And we're taking 249,000 of that out, from that to pay for this paint truck?
So the 701 account, correct me if I'm wrong, but it has a revenue of 1.7 million annually and expenses about 1.3-ish, 1.6-ish annually. So any of the remaining funds that we can capture by doing work for other departments and other agencies all comes into that 701 account to then be able to purchase equipment with.
Mm-hmm.
So just the maintenance of that, the maintenance of that equipment and the buildings, the grounds over there that takes care of all of our 701 fleet is a pretty hefty expense consumed through that motor pool charges that hit the 101, 401, 601 accounts.
Okay. But nonetheless, that's already, you've already ordered the truck, from what I'm hearing you say.
Yep.
Okay. So it's sort of a mute point then at this juncture. And then I think I had one more written down here. No, I guess I don't have any more questions. I just want to reiterate that somehow I want to find the $30,000 to $35,000 minimum to at least increase the pay of the employees up to 2%. Mike is exactly right. That's the exact amount that we just passed a few weeks ago to pay for some lights in a pickleball court. And then I wanted to also just make a comment because I don't feel like I cannot do this. We still are not going to fill those firefighter positions for a cost of $225,000. So I would ask my colleagues to please rethink when you're saying yes to everything, and especially when we came very close to approving $250,000 for a bathroom. And I'll yield the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Giles.
Thank you. So looking at the Park and Rec assorted small reductions, I see there's the really small ticket item, the do not mow price check wayside for $500. And I was just wondering if between Park and Rec and Street Department, if there's any other areas that we can look to reduce mowing or cut mowing, including the city-owned land that we set aside for the pollinators. I know more and more cities are going that route and planting native plants, native grasses, and saving a ton of money.
We always kind of look at different areas that we can save some costs in this area, like mowing. Project Wayside is just across the street from Wildwood Park, the woods itself. It's very natural. We're going to try to reestablish a more wooded area there rather than just being like a park that's not used, because it's used by the Al-Anon Club, but they actually just use the building. They don't use the grass area. So it would be a small savings of $500. We'll continue to explore savings, whether it's riverways or park areas that aren't being used, and try to convert them to more natural areas. But this is probably the one that sticks out the most for us. I can't speak for the street department. I'd have to defer to Tim on that one.
Yeah, so I was kind of handed a existing mowing list, and we've taken a hard look at that. Unfortunately, that with this impact on the employee at the street division, it will have an impact of what we can mow and the timeliness of the mowings. So that will be a direct impact for the budget cuts that have been made with that full-time employee. We haven't. We've tried to lengthen the time for mowing, in between mowings and stuff that happens on veterans in areas that we can get off of our mowing list. I don't have an exact dollar amount to associate with those. That is all work done by our internal staff that not doing it will free it up to continue to work through our construction projects, being another person down. And we unfortunately did have to experience that this summer, being the 2 full-time positions down. Prioritizing our mowing schedule was another impact of that short staffing.
Has the city ever looked into going the route of planting native plants and native grasses in areas that they can instead of mowing?
I'll give you a great example. When we finished up Veterans Parkway, all the property between Veterans Parkway and the railroad, we had planted native grasses. We received enough complaints that the Board of Public Works made a decision to start mowing it. So we did try, that's for sure. We did, that was one of the things we started with, is to try to plant native grasses as part of that project.
I forgot to mention what you asked about mowing. Last year during the budget process, us in streets went to an every other week mowing cycle instead of an every week mowing cycle after August 1st. So there was a savings there. Can't do that obviously in the spring with the wet temperature or the wet weather. It grows too fast. And we also don't mow if it gets dry. So if we have a dry July, the mowers don't go out and mow the areas.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Stauber.
It's nice to be last. I think I'm last. On the topic of citizens' complaints to weeds, I guess my quick thought is, do we post it that this is a, habitat for pollinators or something like that, similar to Peach on 8th Street, I believe, where we say it's a reforestation project going on. Just a little bit of education. So I'm going to go all over the map here, but the budget book in general is fairly similar to looking at a spreadsheet. And one of the things I missed in the budget book is a department or division narrative. And maybe the software doesn't support that, but just a high-level summary, executive summary view of what is occurring in that department, up, down, or staying the same would be helpful to me. And we just did that. It took, I don't know how long for Steve to do it because we questioned it. So just something for future councils. And as long as I'm throwing ideas out there, another one would be budget parameters. If we as a council feel that we don't want to touch wages, then let the administrator know before he spends a lot of time working on these budgets, so that we don't have to get in the weeds and find money to go from 1% to 2%. So these would be budget parameters, not always agreeable, but Mike, you remember working that way with Graham when he was here. Okay, so questions that I have on page 10, just kind of high level again. I'm looking at expenses by category, and every department or every area, general government, public safety, public works, everyone except public safety is coming down. And what is the reason public safety is the only one going up in the projected 25 budget?
I think I can speak at high level, and then certainly we have Jody and Travis here who may want to speak more specifically. A lot of the police budget is driven by wages, which is set by the union. In fact, I think your department is more heavily tied and beholden to wage benefit increases that are predisposed or pre-planned or predetermined. But if there's anything else worth noting, you can certainly come up and do that. I think when I did my presentation last week, I noted that beyond the increases in wages and benefits for police, the rest of the budget only increased by maybe 50,000 or something like that. So if I'm off, let me know.
Yeah, Steve is exactly correct. We had most of it. We had a union contract settled this year. And then we also had the non-represented that you guys passed this year that raised a lot of our costs as far as the wages. In addition to that, there's about $45,000 that we actually added in operating and safety items and that sort of stuff.
All right, thanks, Chief.
Mm-hmm.
On the revenue side, again, page 10, there are a couple of categories I'd like clarification on, maybe examples of what they mean. There's one titled Other Financing Sources. And in 2025, we're projected to drop by $210,548. What are other financing sources and why is it dropping in year over year? Whoever wants to take it.
So our other financing sources are transfers in to the general fund. So for example, in 2024, we had the Marshfield Utilities dividend be transferred in to the general fund. We're not doing that in 2025. That's going directly to the Economic Development Fund. So it's just dependent on what sorts of transfer revenues are coming in and out of the fund.
And then while you're there, miscellaneous revenues is expected to increase by $27,000. What's an example of a miscellaneous revenue and why would it be increasing year over year?
Miscellaneous revenue is where we record our interest revenue.
Okay.
If I'm looking at increases over, that's the bulk of it.
Okay, thank you. And then just so I'm clear on taxes, we're expected to collect reduced taxes in the amount of $314,000, $314,514 year over year. Like last year was 12,857,000. Next year it's 12,482.
So some of our tax revenue is the legislature repealed personal property, so that comes out of our taxes. I've also built in a factor for our clinic settlement, which is estimated to be about $250,000.
Okay.
And then the pilot changes may be something that you're seeing a difference.
Okay, thank you.
in.
That's all I have.
But really, the combination of the clinic settlement and the personal property tax change is, upwards of 450 or something right there. Yeah.
Okay. And then,
Oh, sorry.
if I could, just on the topic of the 701 fund, as I recall, I think 20% of the revenue for the 701 fund is generated by projects. In other words, we will assess projects for use of our equipment and time to the tune of about 20% of that total fund. Does that sound right, Tim?
I apologize. I don't have it memorized what percentage the project is, but it is a line share along with the snowplowing budget is also another large area of motor pool charges.
I'm talking specifically that we charge against projects. So if we're going to redo a street, we charge against that project so that the revenue actually looks like it's assessed to the project. Maybe I'm not explaining that correctly.
Correct. Yep. So all of our projects, let's just take Lincoln, for example, this summer. Every piece of equipment, every asset the city owns that's out there is being charged a DOT rental rate to that project, which then gets billed back to the 401 account.
Okay. And then just for clarification, the street painting equipment or the line painting equipment, that did go through Public Works twice and Council once. And I was really impressed with the justification that the data said by the equipment. We didn't have to really argue that. I think Alderman O'Reilly kind of brought that out of the conversation. That was appreciated. What I learned during that discussion, though, is that sometimes we were paying other organizations like Adams County to come into Marshfield and do street painting for us.
Correct.
So it kind of, the light bulb went on for me. It was like, well, why can't we do that and have a revenue source for street painting? And I'm not saying we would make this our primary mission, but if the crew has some downtime or maybe it's a routine like, Friday, whatever, before beer 30, they go out and paint some streets for someone else and make some money for the city.
Yeah. My first goal is to capture the project work we do have in this city. We had 14th Street on the contract, ended up pulling that back in-house for our crew to complete at a fraction of the cost of what was in the contract.
Okay. I think Jordan might have something to add on that.
So speaking of your topic about 20% for projects, in the 401 correct, they had about $407,000 worth of motor pool charges out of 1.9 million last year. There's also about 209,000 out of the 601, which is wastewater. Those are also projects as well. So your memory is correct on that.
Yeah. While you're there, Jordan, I know I pinged you with an email regarding this potential enterprise fund for the painting machine. Could you tell me why that maybe is not worth the trip or worth exploring further?
I mean, it takes, you know, if you're going to create kind of like a dedicated service, you need dedicated staff, and they're also creating, you know, streets for our city too. So it's just dependent upon what the Public Works Department decides is most relevant. And I think it's really a bigger discussion than just, you know, do we create an enterprise fund for several one-off projects, those types of things.
We will still continue to seek opportunities with nearby communities that would like us to do that work for them. So that won't end.
And I don't want to add staff, so we have an actual department that's here just to paint different cities and such. So it's just having additional employees on staff to do something like Adams County may have additional staff to actually do that.
Yeah, I don't know why Adams County would do it. And I guess this kind of leads me to my closing thing. It's just kind of a mindset to me. It's like if we're faced with cutting staff, there's a way to backfill the revenue so that we can keep that staff employed. And painting streets for someone else at a top dollar might be worth the trip, might be worth exploring it. That's all I'm getting at. And then on that topic, Parks and Rec, Van de Hey Waters, last year at this time, we were talking about, actually maybe right before budget time, we talked about passing the concession responsibility to a not-for-profit organization. And I know there'll be a presentation during the council meeting, but I think it'd be appropriate now. Did we explore that? And is that something that would less burden the Public Works budget?
Last year, there was the discussion about possibly asking for like a non-for-profit or benevolent type organization, whether that was a church or a Kiwanis or a Rotary type club. We talked about it. We didn't quite understand how we could kind of structure it, because obviously we're open 73 days over the summer, 8 hours a day. It's kind of a big operation, starts early. Who's going to oversee it? Who's going to supervise it? We only have really 2 dedicated people to that operation, and then we bring a third person, the attendant up front, to the concession stand when they get busy to operate it. So essentially, you need 1 person at least dedicated to concessions just to manage a non-for-profit. We tried to go out for bids to see if any private business would want to take it on, and most said they just struggle finding adequate staff for their current operations. They just didn't see they could make it venturous, meaning it's so short-term, it's only 3 months. And they said, we're not interested in kind of taking that on. So like a benevolent organization or like a Kiwanis or a Lions or Rotary or even a church group, we would then have to provide our own resources, staffing, just to make sure it stays consistent, or look at them to just run it all. But I assume if they had any interest, they would be doing it in other locations. We have concession stands at Hackman. We have concession stands at soccer right now on Sundays. We have concession stands at the softball fields. And currently, they struggle just finding people to volunteer to do that. So I think just the volunteerism is down community-wide. I just don't think that people are giving back like they used to.
So not to catch you off guard, but did we make money or lose money on concessions last year?
I know you emailed Amanda, and she'll try to get something together. I don't know if you're going to ask that question tonight in a report.
Okay, thanks. And, you know, I guess from my vantage point, I think we should give outside organizations more credit. I don't envision us having to oversee their work. If they're going to take on concessions, they take on concessions. You know, not to oversimplify it, but it's kind of like the Brat Barn at Festival Foods. Not sure how that all works, but I would imagine they're responsible for setting up, make sure they got all the food and clean up. So I'm trying to reduce the number of city employees by taking that operation and farming it out.
Yeah, we it's similar to probably maybe what others have heard or seen is like in a Bucks game or a Brewers game. Sometimes they have certain concessions that are dedicated to volunteer groups who will come in, but they have a full-time food and beverage operator, and there's still staff there from the Milwaukee Bucks or Brewers that are overseeing those operations. A volunteer group comes in, works 2 hours. It's 8 hours a day. 3-4 months out of the year, they're going to have to do work.
Yeah.
And we just couldn't wrap our head on how that would look going into it, how we would reduce staff. And we only have 2 in there right now. So we're really reducing one person.
Okay, and the last thing I have, also Parks and Rec, but the splash pad, I think the gap in budget is $10,000. And it's really just for the water, right?
Yeah, we don't apply any chemical. There's no staff supervision. It's just the water usage.
And we've got a utility that has tens of millions of dollars socked away. Has anyone asked the utility to cover the cost of the splash pad?
I have never asked them to cover that cost.
$10,000. I would think they would probably love to have their name on that, you know, water sponsored by, and put it back up to the normal hours. I mean, it's just another example of where we can just think outside the box and find the money that's out there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to item G. So for item G, this is your opportunity to make motions on anything that's been presented in item E. So basically, what was on this, as well as the extras that Mr. Barg talked about, you can make motions on that. We are going to, just because we have 30 minutes, so just for the sake of efficiency and being a little concise, we're going to invoke the Roberts rules of people can speak twice on a motion. So if you make the motion, that's your first time speaking. According to Roberts rules, you let everyone have the opportunity to speak first. If everyone's had their chance or people don't want to speak, then we'll move into people can have their second. But then hopefully we'll get to a point where we can vote, because we don't know how many motions people might want to take. So at the moment, I'm opening it up to motions. You can press your little buzzer if you would like to make a motion. Mr. Fire, can you say what your motion is?
I'd like to see us pursue the adopt a streetlight charge, to put it onto the electric and water bill, and then we take those funds and spread them out through the budget. That was some of the items that we've taken off because of budget restraints, but I'd like to have as much as possible applied to the employees' payment.
Okay. I have adopt a streetlight charge, put it on the utility bill, and apply it to employee wages. Do I have a second for that motion? A second by Mr. Giles. Is there any discussion? Okay, no discussion. All right. Then it has been moved and it has been seconded to adopt a streetlight charge on the utility bill and apply it to employee wages. So everyone can vote. I did not do my.
Mr. Werman?
No.
Mrs. Spiros?
No.
Okay, so that motion fails. Okay. Do we have any other motions? Mrs. Spiros?
Before I make this motion, I need to ask one question to be sure that this is even possible. And I meant to ask this during the questions and I lost track of it on my paper, so I apologize. Do we have anything budgeted over the 2025 budget to pay for improving playground equipment in any of our parks?
I'm looking out at the Parks and Recreation Director, and he is shaking his head no at this point.
So we're not replacing any playground equipment in 2025?
I do
so
not.
that all just came at the end of 2024 then, right?
Yeah, he's indicating right now that there's nothing in the 2025 budget for what you're asking about with playground equipment.
Okay. Then I will not make a motion at this time.
Okay, do we have any other motions? We don't have any other motions for items that were presented in agenda item E. Then we will move on to any motions for the entire budget. So this would be opening up the entire budget to any changes that people would like to make. Mr. Stauber.
I'll make a motion to approve the recommended budget as presented.
Mr. Stauber has made a motion to approve the recommended budget as presented. Do I have a second?
Second here.
Waiting.
Oh.
Okay, we have a second by Mr. Fire. Do we have any discussion? Mr. Werman.
For clarity on the motion, does that include the cuts presented earlier, including the current cuts we've been discussing most of this meeting with the employee salaries and benefits?
The motion is to approve the budget as presented, as originally presented. So the way I viewed it, now is the time to amend the motion if you would like. I'm not an expert in Robert's rules, but as Steve presented the budget, that's my motion.
Thank you.
Steve?
Thank you. I just want to note, as I think we do every year, that, and I think Jennifer has pointed this out, I have as well, that there are some revenues, that are still being tweaked a little bit. So there, if you do in fact go ahead with sending this to public hearing in the later part of November, we'll have to deal with probably minor adjustments that we don't even know at this point. But we go through this every year, so that's not uncommon for this point in the process.
Okay, any other discussion or questions about the motion to approve the budget as presented? Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, please vote.
Mr. Werman?
No.
Mrs. Spiros?
No.
For, does it need to pass by a majority?
Just a majority.
Okay, that motion passes. I do believe that means that the meeting will be over. Do we still need our Monday, October 28th because of new information?
I don't believe so. At this point, I mean, there may be new information and a couple of the revenue sources that might slightly tweak them one way or another. I suppose we could hold this as a possibility for that. Other than that, no, I mean, I would normally put a line in this agenda that says, if all is deemed to be appropriate, you can just vote to send it on to public hearing on November 26th, actually possibly even earlier now, I would think, given the timeline here, if you want to. But if that's appropriate, I think we could still go ahead with such a motion.
Okay, and that was October, what did you say? Send it on for public hearing?
It would be November 26th would be the public hearing and potential adoption of the budget. And I think, and you maybe correct me if you think I'm wrong, Jessica, based on how that last motion was worded, but I think we could effectively consider that Mr. Stauber's motion took care of that, of sending it to the public hearing, unless I'm wrong. He didn't use those words, but.
Right, I'm just clarifying in statute if it takes a majority of the body or majority present, and that would make a difference in this vote. So I will have to get back to everybody on that. We might have to revisit all of this. I'm looking at statute right now.
Do you want to take some time to look at that, or do you need to do this another day?
You don't have.
Yeah, why don't we have a 5-minute recess so that Jessica can look at the statute. We're gonna call the meeting back in session. Just once we have. Hi. We're gonna call this back in sessions. So Jennifer, Jessica, do you want to say what you have found out?
Yeah, so in reviewing state statute, it is a majority of all alderpersons, not alderpersons present. So this motion did fail with a vote of 5-4. It would take 6 votes to pass.
All right. That motion has failed. Okay, are there any other motions that people would like to make regarding the budget? Any parts of the budget, any amendments? Okay, if we have no more motions, then what we will do is we will meet again Monday, October 30th to 28th, sorry, thank you, the 28th. And, do we have any, item I, do we have any requests from council members for additional information for that meeting on October 28th?
Mrs. Spiro.
Mrs. Spiro.
Can we just get a detailed list of all travel expenses in the entire budget, including the expense of council going to the yearly league meeting?
Absolutely.
And where those charges come from, which department, what it's for, who they're sending, if it's necessary training, that kind of thing.
We will do that.
Any other requests for further information for next Monday's budget meeting? Mr. Varsho.
You said the city planner position's vacant currently, correct?
Correct.
I would like to know what that is monthly, and if we postpone hiring that until April or May, if that's going to make up the 35,000 to add the 2% for the city employees.
Okay, and yeah, there'll be an offset of some kind to continue the consultant we have, but there will be savings, so.
Something like that to let me know where, even if it's 6 months, I know we have consultant fees, any kind of offset to make it that we can gain that 35,000 for the staff.
Okay,
Thank you.
We will get that for you.
So can I just pose a question? Is that okay?
I think you.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay, 2 years ago, first year I was mayor, the tie was 5-5. So then my vote counted as the 6th person? Okay, and all those only 9 of us? It still has to be 6?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and that was me requesting a speaker. I'm like, wait. Okay.
It popped up.
Any other requests for further information to be presented at next Monday's budget meeting?
And that's on the 28th?
That is on the 28th at 6 p.m.
6 o'clock.
I won't be here. I got to go over to the, go to the honor flight. Attorneys, my brother-in-laws are coming back to the honor.
And I don't believe Mr. Werman's going to be with us that night either, correct? So we're at that point pushing a bare quorum of 7.
And there's a non-zero chance it might be indisposed that night too.
Okay, so do we want to have, we might not have a quorum.
Are we able to make the 30th then would be our final meeting, but if we can get the information and have decisions made that night, who can make the 30th?
Or can't? Who can?
Yeah, let's try, who can't?
It'd be Wednesday.
Let's go to who can't.
I fly back to Wisconsin on the 30th. I could squeeze a meeting in on the night of the 29th, but I know that wasn't in the original budget plans.
Yeah, actually, I'll be announcing shortly under my comments on the regular council meeting on the 29th. We do have a meeting scheduled with the CDA and our consultant on the Weinbrenner renovation.
Okay, so we potentially don't have a quorum for Monday. And Rebecca? Oh, wait, I'm sorry, Mr. Sauber was first. I'm sorry, Rebecca, let me call, Mr. Sauber.
I was just going to suggest that there's a alternate solution, and that would be that anyone who voted in the majority, in other words, said no to the motion, could make an amendment and retry to make the motion for approval tonight. In other words, if you've got something low-hanging fruit and you want to include that in the budget, we could move to approve and send it to the public hearing.
All right, so would anyone want to do a motion that would amend the budget in such a way that that person potentially would vote yes for the budget? Mr. Fire?
So what would the motion have to be? How would the motion have to be stated? Do you want to reconsider the original motion? Is that what you want? I'm looking at Jessica. She put it on her shoulders. Can we do that?
He's asking for some sort of another motion where there's some change that would make someone be swayed, which Ms. Tompkins did already ask if anyone had any additional motions, and the answer was no. So I'm not quite sure the direction Mr. Sauber is looking for right now.
And my understanding, if we're in the same session, someone who voted
no
with the prevailing vote could do it, but I don't think you and I could. So it's just a suggestion that someone has low-hanging fruit with 25 budget, make a suggestion to an amendment and a motion, and we could avoid the third meeting as an option.
Okay, Mrs. Spiros?
I was just going to suggest that we cancel the meeting on the 28th with the Common Council, since we're questionable whether we'll have a quorum, and we move it to Tuesday the 29th following the joint meeting with CDA.
Okay, is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Do you have a second for a meeting on Tuesday following the CDA meeting? We have Mr. Rigel. 29th. Okay, so our motion that it has been moved and seconded that we will cancel the meeting on Monday, the 28th, and move that meeting to Tuesday, the 29th, after the joint meeting with the CDA. Okay, any discussion or questions about that motion? Please vote.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. In order to adjourn the meeting, we do actually have to do a roll call. Is that correct? It's a special meeting? Yeah, we're on J.
We're there.
Adjourn. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. It was put as a vote, so you can vote if you want to adjourn the meeting or not. Yeah, yes.
I mean, or Mr. Werman? And Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
Right. The meeting is adjourned.